This is Daniel, Flavio, and Suzana back again to talk to you one more time about a very interesting and special topic today, reincarnation and divine justice. As you can tell, we are trying something else new here. We are trying this video thing, and you have the opportunity and the chance to see these great people on the video. Hopefully you won't be looking at me because I'm not much to look at. But we're very excited to have Flavio and Suzana back here with us to talk today. How are you doing, Suzana?
Hey guys, I'm doing okay. It's about 11:20 p.m. in Miami, and I'm excited to be joining you guys for this new conversation.
It's only H1 here, so we're good, I guess.
And what you're getting is what we promised you, unscripted conversations from wherever in the world we are. And today we are brought together last minute because Flavio and I happen to be attending the same conference for work. And we decided to, start talking about Spiritism when we thought, well, how can we do this without Suzana? Let's just call her really late in the night and give her 15 minutes warning and say, hey, Suzana, can you get in front of the computer in 15 minutes? Because we're going to talk about Spiritism. And lo and behold, guess what? Suzana made it. Thank you, Suzana.
Unscripted. That's our theme, right?
Yeah, that sounds very unfair. That's 8 o'clock over there and 11 here. But that takes us into the topic of justice, doesn't it?
It's a good segue for that topic, right? Because today, if you look at the world, a lot of people think that the world's not just. There are a lot of uncertainties, there are a lot of difficulties, there are a lot of problems, right? A lot of catastrophes. How can we explain that, right? If we use a spiritist lens or prism, how can we even start the conversation, right? In order to get our tones in place.
How can you, Flavio? How can you start the conversation?
So look, for example, if people are suffering or there's catastrophes or disasters, usually people, God is not just because those people over there are going through so many difficulties and we're here, we're living our lives, business as usual. That's a common topic that we hear, very often or very commonly, across the places, right? I think that, again, it speaks for the word divine justice, right? If we believe that everything happens for a reason, and if these folks over here in one part of the globe are going through a lot of difficulties, whereas other folks in different parts of the globe are not, how can God be just or fair, treating people differently?
Or is there a God, right? I think that you nailed it. Oftentimes folks talk to me and then say, well, I don't think that there is a God because I cannot explain these differences that I see out in the world. If I hold a God to be all loving and just, the world around us, which seems pretty chaotic, doesn't seem to lend itself to the idea that there is a God. So I oftentimes hear that whole idea, how can there be that God, or where is God when all this happened, right? So I find that oftentimes we struggle that, especially in Christianity, to understand that because of some preconceived notions. But I don't know about you guys, but when I start grappling a little bit more with reincarnation and try to search for evidence and also understanding of how it could impact my whole worldview, my whole life changed a little bit, right, when I started seriously considering that. But all in all, it's a pretty powerful concept, I think, for me at least. And it's one that I feel like it's brought up regularly for folks who want to know more about it and can't really reconcile the idea of God and the unjust world that Flavio was talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me just, before we even go into reincarnation, right, Daniel said something about God, and he used the word chaos. We look at this chaotic world where we live in, and how can we even, consider an idea of God? And it's interesting because that's one of the things that I find myself often talking with the study groups here in our center. It is how narrow our vision is. So when we talk about chaos and we have this sense of chaos, which, by the way, I too a lot of times can get into this mindset that chaos is actually real. But then, I always invite people that I'm talking to kind of take a broader approach and look at reality, not from this narrow perspective of what we can see with our physical eyes, but without even thinking about spirit, just looking at the universe itself and looking at, the discoveries. This week we had a lecture here with Júlio Carvalho where he talks about God, and he took us into a journey into all the discoveries that talk about the universe and the size of our galaxy and the many numbers of galaxies that are out there. And I couldn't even repeat all the things that he said about it, all the measurements and speed and things like that. So, but it just gave me, like, for the moment that I was listening to him, this perspective of like, wow, when we talk about chaos, we're looking at this tiny, tiny little reality that we find ourselves in. But if you would just, and you don't have to think about all the universes that there is. One is enough to have a sense that actually there is God, and there is harmony, and there is a plan. The issue is what is the plan and how that plan works that justifies what seems to be inequality.
So it seems like we're having some technical difficulties to hear everything that Suzana said. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that or not. But
did you follow me?
I did. I did follow you a little bit. I think that you were talking about scale, right? Just the scale of the universe and the vastness of reality that's out there, as opposed to the reality that we manufacture in our heads, right? In our worlds from our day to day. And I agree with you. I'm often taken by that. And I don't know if you guys ever seen, so I like these like cosmological things and astronomical things. And I don't know if you guys have ever had a chance to watch the old series Cosmos, which was recently remade, and I love that. And in one of the first episodes, if I'm not mistaken, they break down the history of the universe into a 365-day calendar, right? So basically, in terms of equivalence, it says, if we were to squeeze the entire history of the universe as we know it, from the Big Bang to right now, into a year, right, so that we can have a proportion of things, human beings would only have come about in the last, 20 seconds of December 31st or whatever it is, right? So it's just fascinating, and it's really worth a reference. So if you have a chance, go back and search for that. I'm sure you're going to find it on the internet. But it's amazing because of what Suzana was saying is there is this big objective reality out there, and then there's this tiny realities that we make for ourselves because maybe we want psychologically to be in control of things, to feel better about our lives, and we agonize over really small things, right? And so that's where I was thinking when Suzana was talking about it. And I think that reincarnation, from that perspective, frees me a little bit from that and helps me see that as a human being, as a spirit, I am more than just this moment right now. It kind of expands me a little bit more. And it helps me be more tolerant of others as well because of that. But anyways, I don't want to go too far. But does that sound right, Suzana? Is that where you're getting at, or are you?
Yes, I mean, what I was saying is that when I put things into this perspective, is that the idea of chaos is an illusion. That's where I was the link that I was trying to make. There is no true chaos. There is chaos only in our very narrow perception and ability to see. So if there is no chaos and there is an order and there is a force that is in control, whether you call it God or not, then how do we justify and understand the inequalities?
Yeah, but let me throw a little curveball to that comment, Suzana, because many people may think that there's a plan for everything, right? Maybe there's destiny for everything that I do. You see how difficult that gets, right? Yeah. To go over that. If there's a plan for everything, what happened to my free will? What happened to my power to make decisions that are going to impact my own future? Right?
Maybe the word wasn't the best word. I didn't mean to say that there was a plan in that sense, but that there is an order in the universe. That my only point was that there is no chaos. There is an order. There is a force that shows that the entire universe is in harmony. And so, you know, when we look at our day-to-day, we're looking at a speck, a tiny, tiny fraction of this entire universe. And so we have the perception that things are out of order and that we live in a chaos. But this tiny, tiny thing that we are, that we call our planet and our reality, is a speck in the universe. And everything in the universe speaks about order and harmony. And so I was just making a point of, like, in face of the order and the harmony there is in the universe. So going back, how do we explain? And I was just taking on what Daniel said, because he did use the word chaos. And so, right?
Yep. And I can jump. I am 100% on board with what you're saying. And two things jump to mind. One is there cannot be chaos if you truly embrace the idea of God or Creator, right? Because otherwise you see the Creator is not in control, right? Mm-hmm. That would deny this idea of all-powerful, all-loving Creator. And so the other alternative is to realize that maybe the challenge is on our side, like you're saying, right? That we can't see, we only see chaos and we don't see all the order. And in my mind, it's analogous to us looking at a movie, right? When we only see like a tiny scene from a movie, we don't often get what the whole plot is about. But if we zoom out and see the whole movie, then we understand that somebody who might appear to be a bad person in this one part, it's actually a good guy, right? We just missed that one piece. And I feel like oftentimes in life, we are the one frame. Like this lifetime is just one frame that we're looking at. And when we're looking just in that frame, we can't see what Suzana was saying, which is you can't see the sense of order of the
right.
piece. Because there was a scene before that, right? And that scene before the one you're seeing sets up what you're seeing right now. Right?
Perfect.
Yeah. There's a great story that highlights that from a book called Picking Cotton. I'm not sure if you guys have read that book. So I'm going to try to summarize that very, very succinctly or very quickly. So this guy, Ronald Cotton, gets picked up by the police and gets thrown, into jail for a crime that he did not commit. So he's sentenced to life in prison for raping Jennifer, and Jennifer points him. She's 100%, sure he was the one who raped her. So he gets sent into jail. Right? We all know how our jail systems, right, are, and for a crime that he did not commit. He gets a chance to a second trial. During the second trial, he gets sentenced to death. Right? Of course, imagine the emotions that go and the bubble in his head. One day before he had a plan to end his life, his dad visits him in prison. Right? His dad was a pastor back then. And tells to Ronald, I have no idea why that is, but there's definitely a plan for everything that's happening to you. I have no idea, but God must have a plan for you, right? So, long story short, the father is able to convince Ronald not to kill himself, meaning that there was a reason for that to happen, right? And that he wasn't aware what there was. Long story short, he gets, his sentence is reversed. After spending 12 years in prison, he meets Jennifer afterwards, right? Jennifer's, of course, she's sorry for what happened. They become best friends, and they travel all across the U.S., right, campaigning against death penalty. So if any one of us talks about death penalty or against death penalty, we're a very small, tiny voice. If someone that was in death row for a crime that he did not commit talks about death penalty, that has a much, significant weight, right? A much heavier weight than our own voices, our own tiny voices. So I think that's a great story that exemplifies. Yes, the challenge is how to see, right, the reason for everything that happens to us, because we're always looking, very down inside, as opposed to trying to remove ourselves from the picture and look at the 30,000 feet perspective, which is not always easy, right?
No, that's super hard, right? Because let's just try to put ourselves into somebody's shoes that they don't believe in God or that 30,000 feet perspective, right? All we see on Earth is this lopsided system where some people are born in families that obviously have a little bit of an easier time or a lot of bit of an easier time through life. Some folks, don't even have are born and immediately given away. They don't even have a parental support to grow. Some people are end up being really wealthy because of the family, and others are sometimes born without limbs, right? So there's clearly a discrepancy. And if we only look at that one lifetime to be the measure of all things, we can see how people, for lack of a better term, go into this race, but they're starting from different places. And I think we can agree that's obvious, right? When we look around, we see that some people are definitely starting from with a greater, let's say, a handicap, right? Socially speaking,
disadvantage.
Than others. Yeah, disadvantage. Thank you. I thought a handicap is in a race, like a horse race, and so. Clearly, that's challenging, and it becomes really hard for us to understand why that happens if we don't bring reincarnation to the mix, right? If you don't think of reincarnation, then you can't explain why is it that some people are in certain situations and others are not.
Every time, that's amazing, because every time the idea of divine justice or reincarnation, or of God overseeing everything, being all powerful and all loving and just. I come back to a quote from Epicurus, one of the Greek philosophers from 300 BC, that he says something like this, right? So if God is able to prevent evil, but he's not able to, right? Maybe he's not all powerful. If he's able to prevent evil, but he doesn't want to do it, maybe he's malevolent, right? And if he's able and willing to do it, but he cannot really overcome evil, why call him God? So when we hear those phrases, and it was a philosopher, right, trying to question the existence of God and all that. When we hear those phrases that God's not able to prevent all the evil that may happen to us, right, we're only seeing evil from a very short-sighted vision of it's evil for me now, something bad's happening to me now, right, and it's not fair, the world's not just. How can we extrapolate that vision and try to find a much higher or much more important reason for all the so-called bad things that happen to us?
Flavio, while you were talking over there, something else came to my mind. You were saying about evil things that happens to us, and I know that we are talking about the concept of reincarnation, but even before talking about the concept of reincarnation comes the concept of immortality, the immortality of the soul. And so there are a lot of folks out there that may not believe in reincarnation, but do believe in the immortality of the soul. And they believe that the soul goes on, and, with that, the life of the spirit is the real life, and this time here is just what it is. It's a time. And that always brings me back, because recently I did talk to someone about this, premature deaths of kids, which is excruciating. I cannot even imagine, now that I am a mother and you guys are fathers, what would it feel like to lose a child at a young age. So it seems pretty unfair. And what I find interesting is to find actually spiritists who would make statements such as, oh my gosh, this child or this young person had such a bright future ahead of him or ahead of her. And when we read the Gospel according to Spiritism, in chapter 5, there's some interesting statements there that really challenge us in our ways of thinking, because this particular statement, what a bright future he or she would have here, is still a very materialistic type of statement. Yep. Because we are considering that our bright future is here in this planet of trials and expiations, and is still characterized by tremendous amount of suffering. And so I like very much that passage in the Gospel where the spirits compare it to two very good friends being in prison, and then one of them is released before the other one, and how the person who stays behind in prison would feel like. Would he or she want for the friend who was released to stay in the jail with them, or would they feel happy that they actually are done with their time? And that's how they put this thing into perspective. So I always find this interesting. It's not into the topic of reincarnation, but it's an exercise even for us who are spiritists to, of course, there's the pain, there's the suffering. It's always going to be, because for us in our condition, it is still very hard, the separation and the physical distance. It is a real cause of suffering for us in our level of evolution. But to see what people say and how we speak about it, it's very interesting, because even for us who are spiritists and deep believers in the immortality of the soul, we still make statements that makes this lifetime here sounds like the real thing.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think it's not out of place at all, your comment about the immortality of the soul, right? Because if we don't go into the immortality of the soul, it becomes really hard for us to get reincarnation, right? Because you can't believe reincarnation without believing that. I think that makes a lot of sense in many different ways. And it makes me think, too, of the different beliefs that one can have about the immortality of the soul, right? And I see that quite often. I see people who believe that the soul is created at conception, and that the soul then goes on after that, after the physical body. There are those who believe that the soul has already existed before we are born, and then it lives on afterwards. There are even those who believe that the soul is created when we are born, and then the soul dies when we die, right? Which seems to defeat the whole purpose of having a soul. But right, like it's perspective. I'm not criticizing, but I'm just like in my own brain to kind of think about it. And obviously, you have those who don't believe that there is a soul at all, right? And obviously, everybody can have their own perspective, and I think that we can talk quite a bit about, the benefits or the implications, philosophically speaking, of divine justice based on reincarnation. But if I may, I want to throw a curveball at both of you guys and say, pretending that I'm on the other side of this conversation and saying, well, they're talking about reincarnation, but how do I know that there is reincarnation? What kind of proofs and evidence is out there that in fact there is reincarnation, right? Rather than a philosophical debate that we're having here, which basically says, like, if there is a God and God is just, then there has to be reincarnation. Are there things out there and studies and things that we can refer to lend some credence to the idea that there is actually reincarnation?
Oh, the one that comes to my mind right off the bat is the work that Dr. Ian Stevenson has done. In a couple of the works, one of his memoir books is 20 Suggestive Cases of Reincarnation, after interviewing over 1,000 kids. And, these kids would remember their previous lives, and oftentimes these previous lives had nothing to do with their current lives. For example, different locations, different cities. He traveled, across the world, started in India, but that's a phenomenon that he observed in many, many different countries, from kids, very early ages, that would remember, and he would validate those stories, investigating, going after the really root cause of those stories from children who remember previous lives. This is a methodologically, a study that he has done, throughout multiple years of his research life, and this is one that it speaks very highly of, again, reincarnation. But at the end of the day, Daniel, if I'll throw you a curveball again, right? So, not to prove that reincarnation exists, how about, can you prove that reincarnation doesn't exist? How about that?
How about that, Flavio? How about that? Very well, sir. Well played, sir. Well played. No, but I think that's a valid question. I think a lot of materialistic folks, and I mean materialistic in the nicest possible way, people. I mean people who focus on the material being the only existence, right? Now, I'm not telling you that you're attached to money and buying cars and living it up in Vegas. That's not what I'm saying.
We just need these words to kind of differentiate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say, like, well, I die and then nobody has ever come back and told me about reincarnation, right? That's one way I think I would try to prove that there is no reincarnation, but people have actually come back and told us about reincarnation, right?
Yep.
I think what Flavio was saying was really interesting with Ian Stevenson because of the choice of children, right? Because one of his memories, the recollections with children because of the fact that they were young and they couldn't have been acculturated or influenced yet. But I also find other interesting cases along with Ian Stevenson of folks who also do regression, past life regression, right?
Right.
Another interesting thing. Like, you know, we have Brian Wise and Andrew Newberry, I think. No, that's the other guy. What's the
Carol Bowman.
Carol Bowman,
yep.
So there's all these people who, you know, have stumbled into the fact that they were trying to oftentimes regress back to childhood to find out the origin of that trauma and find themselves, oops, we went a little behind, you know, before that, and now these people are having these memories that are hard to explain. There's one other instance, but I also want to pull out a third factor that I think that for us is a little bit more common and for some folks might not be, is mediumship, right? Through mediumship, our spirit mentors and guides have also been able to come back and tell us that they too have had previous lives, right? So we add another proof point to the piece there. Not only are there studies based on Dr. Ian Stevenson and many others, there is a regression, there is mediumship communication with those who no longer have a physical body and telling us, hey, I used to have one before and I had many lives. So these are two other things that I would add to the list there as well, Flavio. But I can't disprove it, ultimately, like the way you look at it, right?
Exactly, right? So people ask oftentimes, hey, can you prove reincarnation exists? Well, can you prove it doesn't exist? First of all, it's one of those things, right? There's another book that I would say it's a much easier
There's always
read.
one, right, Suzana? There's always that annoying kid in the back.
There's always one that is raising
to
questions.
ruin it for the rest of us.
No, but I'll make it easy on you guys. There's also a book for the readers, right? People that like to read, called Soul Survivor, The Reincarnation of a World War II Fighter Pilot. It's a much easier read from the parents of James Leninger, who they were really puzzled that their 2-year-old son began screaming, right, cheating phrases and having some really nightmares, remembering his life as a fighter pilot during World War II. And it's a great movie. There are also a CNBC documentary on that couple, on the little James, who would remember his previous life. He ends up going to a veteran reunion, and he meets some of his colleagues, and he would remember some of his colleagues. So it's an amazing read that, again, much easier than Ian Stevenson, who is a scholar, who is a researcher, right? It's a much heavier read. But
I remember the name of the guy that I forgot, Michael Newton.
Michael Newton. Yes.
Michael Newton. He did Journey of Souls and the books and so forth, and he also did a study of in-between lives. He would regress people to in-between lives, which is interesting as well. Sorry, I had to, I
no problem at all.
All things, so I had to interrupt you.
So when you mentioned Carol Bowman, she was also a psychologist who helped little James, or James the third, in his remembrances, right, of his previous life.
Do you know if at this point in his life, I mean, this documentary that you're talking about was maybe a couple of years ago, maybe, I'm not sure, but I wonder if at this point of his life he still has the same memories. I think I remember hearing something that, which is very common, that during childhood, those memories are a little bit more alive and kids can get more easily in touch with them. And then as they grow, a lot of times it kind of fades away. So I thought I heard something that he currently could no longer, he didn't have the same memories anymore, which is just interesting.
I don't have any details on that. I think the book was written in 2010. If I'm not mistaken, he was 7 years old by then. So I think 6 more years, he'll be 13 right now. Mm-hmm. And, but I do not know if he still remembers. It's a great point, Suzana, yes. But I want to go back to, when you mentioned the chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, and you said that I actually beg to disagree that it has everything to do with reincarnation, because the title of
Don't beg, just disagree.
I disagree. That's who I am, right? Blessed are the afflicted, right? The justice of afflictions. And if we don't really believe that our lives will go beyond this one, some of our afflictions, right, cannot be justified, right? To Daniel's point, if I'm born with all my limbs, if I'm born with capacity to learn, right? If I'm born in a well-off family, meaning that I have no abuse when I was growing up. I mean, it was very stable and stable life, stable family, right? Or stable life overall, versus some of my brothers and sisters who are born into much more difficult situations. How can you understand, how can you explain their afflictions in light of comparing their affliction with mine that seem very small? So again, the gospel talks about that the whole promise that Jesus brought to us was the life after death, right? The life, our real life, which is beyond the grave, right? So if you don't put that into perspective, it becomes very difficult to really comprehend the way I personally believe reincarnation.
Yeah, I have a patient right now in the clinic. I've been treating this guy for maybe 2 months, and he's a patient with Parkinson's disease, and he is in his 80s, was a successful man, and pretty bitter. And so at this point, every single day, believe me, every single day that I see him for therapy twice a week, at some point in the middle of the treatment, he looks at me and he says, "Why me? Why me?" And then I have been asking him, "Why not you? What makes you so special?" And, he's like, "I was a good person." And I said, "So is it that only the so-called bad people, right, get sick and have diseases and things like that?" So it was interesting because little by little, and I had other patients with I had a guy who was a professor and was suffering tremendously because he was fully aware of his cognitive deficits. And so, when I have a little bit of a window, I try to talk to them and I usually ask them, "Do you have any spiritual beliefs? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in anything at all?" to see if I can put out there some concepts. Because as you said, it's just like, what Spiritism gives us. It does not take the pain, the difficulties, the challenges away, but it just puts everything into perspective. First of all, it gives you this resignation where this active acceptance is not that you're not going to fight anymore, but this peace from knowing that everything is fine, that there is a reason, whether you can see or not, whether you can understand or not, the certainty deep inside you that there is a reason, in that the idea that the entire universe is conspired for your well-being. It's not against you. Everything, the entire life, all the circumstances are conspiring for your spiritual growth. It just adds such an incredible twist and an incredible different taste to everything that we undergo in this life, right?
It does. And with that thought, let's make a quick pause, and we will be right back, continuing with those words from Suzana. And we're back so quickly. Maybe because we don't have any sponsors. Maybe because we don't have any commercials. But maybe you could announce and sponsor our program. Maybe you could share with us some of announcements. Maybe you can call in and tell us what you want us to talk about. There's lots of maybes in that question. At one point in time, maybe we should stop asking questions about maybes. But following up on Suzana's great point, which is really the key to this, right? As you were talking, Suzana, I remember one of my favorite parts, I think, of Kardec's work, which is, I think, if I'm mistaken, his introduction of the Medium's book. And he said something fantastic. He said something that we already know based on our empirical observation of the world. We know that every effect has a cause. So if something exists, it's because it was caused by something else, right? And then he goes further to say, from a spiritual perspective, that if the causes to an effect are not visible in this lifetime, then they must be from a previous life. And I found that to be incredibly powerful and simple in the same way, right? So if the causes for a problem that I might be facing now cannot be found in my current life, it is quite possible they come from a previous life, right? They're just a continuation from that one scene to the next in the movie, except that I haven't had the privilege of being privy to seeing the previous scene. which also should also make sure that we don't create an excuse for ourselves, right? We shouldn't say, oh yes, you know, I was born with a shortcoming, you know, my stomach, you know, I have an ulcer. Well, it's because maybe in this lifetime you abused food, right? So don't blame it on a past life. Like there's a cause and consequence thing. But there's a great, beautiful message there in the fact that the consequence of our actions kind of continue when we look ourselves past just one scene, just one life. And as you were talking about it, you know, the whole thing of like, why not you? What a powerful question, right? Right? And say, oh, why me? Why not you? What makes it so special to think that everybody else needs to deal with the consequences of their actions, but not me, right?
Right.
Or the whole chaos thing again, right? Like, it's all chaotic out there because I don't understand it. If I understand it, everything's great. But if I don't understand, I'm going to call it chaos, right? Because I am the center of the universe. Right? If I close my eyes like a kid, all of you guys disappear, so you guys just don't exist, right? It's a little bit of a juvenile logic, but we still do it every day, right?
Oh, yeah. It's juvenile, but still very present in our daily lives, right? That's the way it is. There's a quote from Emmanuel, the Spirit Guide. I don't remember exactly the words.
Flavio's full of quotes today. Did you see that?
I know. Imagine that.
It's very quotey.
And this is, by the way, guys, this is unscripted, unplanned, right? And imagine if we had actually planned for this. And the quote goes somewhere along the lines.
Well, if we had planned for this, you would probably, if you're watching this, you'll probably see that we have better backdrops.
Oh, yes.
We're literally in hotel rooms right now, so.
So let me see if I can remember the quote somehow. So Emmanuel, the Spirit Guide, talks about human justice, right? It's still respectable, by the way. He usually judges facts that are considered punishable, right? So if you've done this, as if you've done a crime, you do the time, right? Something like that. Whereas if you look at divine justice overall, it observes all occurrences from the smallest impulses or smallest ideas, right? That are both present and beforehand from this on this lifetime. So when we look at that as a movie, pictures, right? We're only seeing a very tiny fraction of the movie. Divine justice sees the entire movie, right? And it gives us the best place. That's why we say that in Spiritism we like to say that we are in the best place with the best people around us, with the best circumstances, so which that we can continue growing spiritually. And sometimes one of these, difficulties, one of these obstacles is so much given so that it enables us to do better in life. It enables us to really progress towards our real life, which is not our material life, which is not our physical life. Right? Look, for example, when there's some of these catastrophes, right? Look how much charity, how much eagerness to help arises from people's hearts, right? How much everybody, volunteers, everybody really is in the mood to help those who are in need. Right? Whereas if everything is going business as usual, all those, it wouldn't be the same, as we know, right? So, great question. I think it has everything to do with what we're talking about, right? The difference between human justice, divine justice, and our own difficulties, obstacles, who are always, right, helpful for us somehow, some way, even if we don't comprehend them at fullest, right?
You know what I was thinking while you were talking about it, because I was thinking that we talked about how some folks need some kind of evidence to leap into the pond of reincarnation, right? And so we talked about Ian Stevens and so forth. And I was also thinking about folks who prefer to get their facts from elsewhere, right, other than science. And sometimes I get questions about that. Well, I really want to believe in reincarnation. I think it makes a lot of sense, but I don't find any basis to that in the Bible, in the New Testament. How would you guys react to that? Apparently you wouldn't react to that at all.
I would say there are a lot of quotes, there are a lot of in the scriptures themselves, right? The one that really strikes me is Elijah and John the Baptist, right? It's a great comment that Jesus made that to John. If you look at that there are a lot of passages, a lot of quotes that can exemplify that we would need maybe additional minutes to cover though. But again, definitely they're present, right, in the New Testament.
One thing that actually my mind went a little bit in a different direction. I was thinking about folks who actually do believe that there is order, that there is God, that there is justice, and they don't believe in reincarnation, right? So that's just another facet to it. I had a person who, a girl from Brazil who was part of our center for a long time, very Catholic. She did enjoy the center. She enjoyed the concepts. One day she came to me and she said, is it a problem if I don't believe in reincarnation? Because I really would like to continue to come. But it really does not fit my mind or, my belief system. I like everything else. I just cannot, and she was a very, faithful in her Catholic system. And so I just kind of want to throw that out there because I think that for us, it helps in, what that makes me think, and I don't know what you guys think about it, but what that makes me think is like, well, whether she believes it or not, she is an immortal being. And in our understanding, she has lived before, she will continue to live. And so the spirit perhaps instinctively brings in himself or herself the sense of immortality and the sense of God's justice somehow. How do we reconcile this?
That's great. Did you tell her about the Spiritist buffet?
The what?
That Spiritist is like a buffet. You can come and you can have any little piece of it and still partake in the meal. You don't have to eat the entire buffet spread to be called yourself a Spiritist. So hopefully she can still keep coming and talking to us about that, even if it's the pancakes, the Spiritist pancakes of reincarnation. But to go back to your point, I think it's a really great perspective because I can see how that is a difficult thing to reconcile because we have been accustomed to different systems of thinking that don't take reincarnation into account. Even though if we go back, for instance, to the creation of the New Testament, back into the Council of Nicaea, back in the 3rd century or whatever it is, we're going to see that the creation of the New Testament and everything else was a little convoluted. We can talk maybe about that some other time. But what I found interesting, too, because I thought about this, and I get that question oftentimes, and for me, I can tell you, for me, how I work it out in my mind, right? I try to zoom back to God and say, well, if I only have one life, this whole idea of heaven and hell based on one life becomes a somewhat unfair proposition, right? Because if we're talking about being rewarded for the rest of eternity, and I cannot even grasp eternity, right? I cannot even grasp more than like 1,000 years is hard for me to grasp, really hard, right? So am I really being judged on 60, 80 years if I'm lucky, right? On those 80 years, am I going to be judged on 80 years and that's going to decide millions and millions of years of my existence afterwards? That sounds pretty unfair when I don't even do that with my kid, right? I don't judge my kid for the moment where he ate 2 candies, right, before going to sleep when I told him not to, and he's wired up, right? Of course, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not very happy generally then, but the next day, I'm not going to be saying, well, you can never eat candy ever again, or you can never eat anything but vegetables again because of that one time that you ate, an extra piece of candy, right? So I think that in my mind, when I think about God and justice, I find it hard for us to justify some of the models that, sociologically speaking, we've built for ourselves over history that tells us that we are judged over 60 years of, it doesn't sound fair. And how about the people that don't even have that, right? How about, like Suzana was talking about the kids who die, the infants who die really young, right? So how do you get judged on those 3 days that you lived, maybe 30 minutes? How is that decided? That sounds hard for me to reconcile.
I think it's very philosophical in the sense that it's very unfair to some and privileged to others, right? So that tells me that God loves these folks more than those folks over there. And to me, that's not a fair God, right? That cannot be God if it's not fair, it's not just, if it's not loving all of us, right, as his children or as its children. When I look at Daniel, I have twins. Right? Everybody knows I have twins, or if you don't know, I have two 4-year-old twins. And
not everybody knows, Flavio.
Yeah, okay. No, you guys know. Not everybody like you guys know. So the way I look at them.
Hello, everyone. Flavio has twins, and if you want to know more about Flavio's life, go to www.cameras247 and Flavio'sLife.com. You get to know everything about his life and everything he does.
Thank you for the joke. Sounds much better. No, just kidding. So what I was mentioning was, I look at them as two separate individuals, right? And when I look at them as two separate individuals, some of them, sometimes are going to do all those things that I look at, oh yeah, maybe so-and-so is not having a good day today, or maybe so-and-so is not having a good day the other day. Yet they're two separate individuals, and I love them the same, right? So if something happens there, I still love him the same. So when I look at God, of course, extrapolate our own loving to our own kids, right? The way we believe God loves us, in a much more superlative meaning that is ultimate loving, right? Father and mother. I can even fathom to believe that He would love some children more than others. And in that same essence, if you were born in one way, in one circumstance, one set of circumstances, right? You're going to get preferential treatment. To me, that's not God, right? And if I didn't believe in reincarnation, if I didn't believe that God was just, I wouldn't probably be believing God at all. And I understand why some folks refuse to believe in a God that treats some better than others, because they themselves cannot treat one of their sons, one of their children, better than the other. And it's perfectly understandable, right, where they're coming from.
Guys, I just want to put in there that, the idea of reincarnation can be very challenging for many people. One of the greatest challenges that comes with the idea of reincarnation is that it destroys completely anything that separates us. And so, like, for example, race. So race is an illusion because it's material, and for some people, the idea of being born in a different race, if they have prejudices, can be extremely Comfortable, exactly. Or the idea that you could be born in a different gender. So if you think about it, it's I think for many people, it can be extremely challenging, and even we spiritists, we have our own share of biases because this whole concept of immortal spirits at times is still a lot more cognitive belief system than it is a inner reality, so to speak. So I remember discussing gender in a study group and having one guy who really was clearly uncomfortable with the idea of possibly being born as a woman in a next life. For him, it was, with all the issues with women and the sense that women is inferior and it's not as powerful and it's not as good. It was clear part of his psychology, and it was incredibly difficult. So, it's late. We're not going to be able to delve too deep into this, but I just want to kind of, put this aspect because we didn't talk about it. And it does not speak so much to the issue of inequalities, but just the challenge with accepting the idea of reincarnation.
I think if I could throw a small set of words for that is the whole purpose of us in this life or in our lives is to achieve moral, relative perfection, right? So to grow spiritually speaking. And there are certain situations or circumstances that we can only experience in one sex or in one gender or in one circumstance versus the other. So, for example, guys will never have the ability to experience what it is to give birth, right? Because it's physically impossible to do so. Again, same way that since we have to know all of these things, we have to progress in all angles, in all directions, we have to come back and be born in different situations, right? One time, being very wealthy to understand how that is. Other times being not so wealthy or poor, understand what that is, right? Wealth versus, poverty, male versus female, in terms of experiencing all the aspects of what's going to make us, right, progress spiritually. So when you look at that from those lenses, or from that lens specifically, I believe it makes it easier to understand the whole picture. But to your point, right, we all have our own biases, our own prejudices that we bring forward to our own lives, that they're not easy to be overcome. By all means, they're not. Right?
And I was going to toss in there that I wholeheartedly agree with what Suzana was saying. And, I really feel like reincarnation is the really great equalizer, right, with time, because it makes us think that. And even though we're not there yet, eventually we'll get it. And I was going to throw one more thing in there. I think religion is also a factor in reincarnation, right? Because not only a gender orientation, race, but also religion. Because if you think about it, the religion or the organized religion that we embrace is oftentimes, nowadays in our planet, a product of geography, right?
Sure.
It's sometimes hard for you to be a Christian if you were born in Malaysia with a strong, Muslim piece, or in Japan when we have a lot more Shinto and so forth. So there's a social product to organized religion that is also a factor. So I think that would also expand our tolerance towards all these great things that we clearly need to work on. We need to work on accepting gender, race. We need to do a much better job of that. I think we can all agree, and hopefully we're all working towards that. But I was also going to say that, funny enough, I also think that reincarnation explains our biases a little bit too, right? Because, what do I mean by that? Because we've been accustomed to these belief systems that we've had for many lifetimes, and so it's sometimes hard for us to let go of them in this life. So clearly they're learned, right? Like, we know that discrimination and prejudice are learned behaviors. But sometimes we also bring those from past lives. We don't necessarily wipe the slate completely clean spiritually when we go from one life to the next. We sometimes carry these biases. So it's only natural that sometimes we'll also hold these beliefs that are not conducive to collaboration and great awareness when we've been used to having these same beliefs for like many lifetimes. So it takes time to change too, right?
Sure.
To point that out too. But I do believe that reincarnation, like Suzana beautifully said, is the great equalizer. It is what's going to eventually help us be more tolerant with each other too.
I think it's the missing link, right? In Christianity, it's the missing link in a lot of the philosophies that talk about, the life after death or life after, the grave, and I do subscribe to that same thought process, of course, right? Following Spiritist teachings, and but there's one thing I would say though. When I was much younger, and I thought that if everybody believed in reincarnation, the world will be free of problems, and that's not quite so, right? Look at some of the other religions. That look at Indians exactly. They believe in reincarnation, and that didn't change them much, right? In terms of do we expect everything to be it's going to be all peaceful and all.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
we actually use that as a tool to enslave others, right?
You were born there, you must be there for the rest of your life. Therefore, right? Exactly. Right? So you got to be careful how we frame things.
How we frame things. I think it's a great point, Flavio, and we're reaching the end of our time, and I think that we talked about very different perspectives, right, of the justice of reincarnation. Obviously, we cannot cover everything. It's just such a vast topic, and it's late. We are in a hotel room in San Francisco, Flavio and I, and poor Suzana is braving the midnight oil in Florida because we were crazy enough to call her. But I want to talk back to you guys and just do a zoom out and some high-level summation of, so what would you say about reincarnation, divine justice in just a couple of minutes so that we can wrap this up and invite folks to send us more questions for next episodes.
Suzana, you can go first.
After 1 hour, what we can sum up, I mean, For me, it just, it's thinking of life as stages. We started talking, I think, fairly quickly into like many different aspects. And so I would just throw probably the very beginning of where we should start thinking. We're mortal beings. We are in a journey of enlightenment. And the way we like to think about it in Spiritism is that, no one can reach full enlightenment in one lifetime. So we're in a journey like stopping in different classrooms, progressing. And there is a connection. Everything is connected. There is a reason for everything. There is a meaning for every single experience, as we have talked about. And so there are so many things in the universe that we deal with and we don't understand, but we know that there is a reason behind, even with technology, simple technological stuff that we deal with. And I'm not quite sure how all these technologies are working right now to make me see you guys over there, but it works. And there is a system behind it. And I know it exists because I see the product of it. So, same thing with our lives. I mean, we're not going to understand everything, but I loved the idea of the movies and the scenes. I think that really illustrates well. It made me think about the movie The Others. Not that I want to get into that, but if you have seen that, I mean, it's just like you're looking at that present scene and you really miss the entire gist of the story, which is, I pretty much think what, the concept of reincarnation is. We're just looking at a very small glimpse. There's so much more to our story and to who we are.
And if I could comment that's a great point. So I'll go back to the scriptures, because many people think that because they follow Jesus' teachings, they shall not believe in reincarnation. It's against what Jesus said. And I'll add one more comment too. When Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, right, and he tells that no one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again, right? Mm-hmm. The same, I think it's John 3:3. In the same essence that we have to come back here, right, to continue our evolution, to continue our ladder of progress that we all aspire to get one day. When you look at many different experiences, many different things that we do when we engage, right? When you look at our atonements, right? Since we talk about afflictions or difficulties, obstacles, there's no such thing as divine justice to me without reincarnation. I can only understand God as just and fair and all powerful with the concept of reincarnation. Without it, right? God wouldn't be fair. God wouldn't be just, and to me, God wouldn't even exist, right? Because I wouldn't be able to comprehend it, why there is something called God that we don't understand. To me, that's the missing link again, right? That we need to. That to me makes total sense.
Yeah, I love what you guys said. I'm not going to add much to it because I think you guys nailed it. I'm also very excited about the fact that as we grow in understanding, we can see that there's also some scientific studies that validate that, besides the own study of mediumship and natural memories that kind of come back and show us that more and more there is a case for reincarnation happening. But I really like what Suzana helped us focus on and narrow back to, which was, at the end of the day, it's important for us to remember that we are spirits first, and incarnate bodies or souls that are occupying a physical body temporarily second. And when we remember that, I think that it makes it a lot easier for us to deal with our day-to-day and understand that even though we're different, maybe we're white today, or tomorrow we might not be white. We might be Christian today and tomorrow not Christian. That all this changes. It's not who we are. Who we are is what we do, the values and the things that we carry on with us, and that there is always an effect to all the causes that we set out into the world every single day. So I really love that reincarnation brings it back, and I love talking to you guys because you guys always remind me of that, whether it be in science or the scriptures or just today commentary with people. It's fantastic, and hopefully we can reincarnate the show again and come back for another episode in the near future.
All right, next time the show is going to be on my choice of time.
You got it. I think it's only fair. Divine justice will prevail. All right. Thanks, everyone. It was fantastic talking to you guys again. And have a good night.
Good to see you.
God bless you, and see you soon.